Rosa Delgado heard the stallion scream a mile before she saw the ranch. Not hunger, not impatience, terror. She knew that sound, had heard it once before the day the Anaconda mine collapsed, and Antonio's voice echoed up from the darkness calling for help that came 3 hours too late. Her hands froze on the wagon reins. Every instinct said, keep driving. Get to Silver Creek, buy the fabric, keep the customers happy, stay alive. But that horse was screaming for someone who couldn't answer, and Rosa had ignored those screams once before. Before Rosa's story takes you somewhere you can't come back from, and trust me it will, I need you to do something. Subscribe. Hit that bell. Because this story gets brutal before it gets beautiful, and I need you here when the town tries to destroy her for doing the right thing. Comment your city and state below. Let's see how far one woman's courage can travel. Montana Territory, 1885 to wherever you're sitting right now. Let's go. 20 below zero. Nathaniel Bridger's hands shook as he measured oats into Thunder's bucket. Fever, probably. Or the cold. Hard to tell anymore when your body'd been trying to quit for 2 days straight. Just finish the chores, he muttered. Then you can rest. Thunder nickered, pressing his massive bay head against Nate's chest. The stallion knew something was wrong. Animals always knew. Nate pushed him back gently. I'm fine, boy. Let's get you fed. He wasn't fine. Chills had started yesterday morning, mild enough to ignore. By evening, his temperature had climbed high enough that Catherine's face kept appearing in the corners of his vision. Her blonde hair catching lamplight, her laugh echoing from the kitchen she'd never cook in again. You're burning up, Catherine's ghost whispered. I know. Come inside. Rest. Can't. Horses need feeding. They need you alive more than they need breakfast. Nate didn't answer. Couldn't explain that staying alive wasn't exactly the goal anymore. Hadn't been for 3 years since the day he'd buried her and their baby daughter in frozen ground behind the house. The horses kept him going, that was all. Feed them, water them, check their hooves, record everything in the notebook Catherine had given him their first Christmas. One more day, then one more. Then one more, until maybe one day he'd just stop. Thunder's bucket first. 3 scoops of oats molasses mixed in for the cold. The stallion deserved the best 16 hands of pure Arabian bloodline worth $1,500 to the right cavalry buyer. If Nate could find a buyer before Silas Thornton foreclosed on the whole damn ranch. Don't think about that now, he told himself, but the numbers haunted him anyway. $5,000 owed, 3 months overdue, 6 weeks until Thornton could seize everything Catherine had loved. Nate lifted the bucket. His arms felt wrong, weak, shaky, like they belonged to someone else. Just get to the corral, 10 more steps. 5 steps. The world tilted sideways. Nate's knees hit the frozen ground, and the bucket flew from his hands, oats spilling gold across white snow. His shoulder slammed into something metal, the rake handle leaning against the fence, and pain exploded white-hot across his temple. Then nothing. Just cold. Snow against his cheek. And from very far away, thunder screaming. 8 miles down the frozen road, Rosa counted money she didn't have yet. $8 for Mrs. Henderson's dress, she murmured to Pablo, her steady brown gelding. -3 for fabric, 1 for thread and buttons. $4 profit. $4 was 2 weeks' rent. $4 was flour and coffee and maybe new needles for the sewing machine. $4 was the difference between surviving December and not. So don't mess this up, she told herself. Get to town early, buy exactly what's on the list, deliver the dress 3 days ahead of deadline. Because being Mexican in Silver Creek meant you didn't just meet expectations, you exceeded them, every time. Or you starved. Rosa had learned that lesson 4 years ago, when Antonio died, and the mine company's sympathy lasted exactly as long as the funeral. No pension for temporary workers. No compensation for widows who should have known the risks. Just a polite suggestion that she might want to return to her people in New Mexico. Instead, Rosa had rented a room above the Mercantile for $15 a month, bought a used sewing machine for $30, and built a business one dress at a time. 4 years, 40 customers, 0 complaints. She'd survived by being invisible when necessary, indispensable when possible, and always exceeding expectations. The road curved past Copper Ridge Ranch, and Rosa glanced toward the sprawling property out of habit. Beautiful land. 1,800 acres of prime grazing good water-protected valleys. The kind of place her father would have killed for back in New Mexico. Nathaniel Bridger had built something special here, then watched his wife die and turned into a ghost. Rosa had seen him once in town, tall, lean, moving through the Mercantile like a man sleepwalking, buying supplies with mechanical efficiency, speaking to no one, his eyes focused somewhere past the present into a grief that had no end. Pearl Wong, who ran the Chinese laundry, said he'd been different before, laughing, social, the kind of man who'd help a neighbor without being asked. But grief breaks some people, Pearl had said in her careful English. He broke. Rosa understood that. She'd felt herself cracking the day they'd pulled Antonio's body from the mine shaft, felt the fissures spreading through her foundation like ice, splitting rock. She'd made a choice to keep living anyway. Had Nathaniel Bridger made the same choice? Not my business, Rosa thought, urging Pablo forward. Then she heard the horses. Pablo's ears pricked forward, and his pace slowed without Rosa's command. He'd heard it too, that sound coming from the Copper Ridge corrals. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Rosa pulled Pablo to a complete stop, her heart suddenly hammering. She'd grown up on her father's ranch in New Mexico, learned to read horses before she could read books. And these horses weren't just calling for breakfast. They were screaming for help. "Easy, boy," Rosa whispered. The sound came again, a stallion's voice, powerful and desperate. The kind of sound that meant emergency, disaster, someone dying. Rosa's hands tightened on the reins. "Keep driving. Get to town. This isn't your problem." But the stallion screamed again, and suddenly, Rosa was standing outside the Anaconda mine, while men called from the collapsed shaft. "Help us! Someone help!" They'd called for hours. She'd stood there frozen with fear, while Antonio died in the darkness. 7 men had died that day because the rescue team took too long to arrive. Because people had heard the calls for help and decided it wasn't their problem. "Forgive me, Mrs. Henderson," Rosa whispered, turning Pablo off the main road. No smoke from the chimney. That was wrong. 20 below zero and no fire in the stove meant whoever lived here was either gone or couldn't light one. Rosa tied Pablo to the fence post, her fingers clumsy with cold and growing dread. "Mr. Bridger." Her voice sounded too loud. "Mr. Bridger, are you all right?" Silence. Just the horses screaming and the wind and her own breath coming too fast. Boot prints led from the house to the barn, one set, going out but not coming back. Rosa followed them, her heart climbing into her throat. She found him beside the barn, collapsed in the snow like a broken toy someone had dropped. A wooden bucket lay overturned nearby oats, scattered across white like spilled coins. Blood seeped from a gash on his temple, where he'd hit something, a rake handle lying close enough to tell the story. "Mr. Bridger." Rosa ran her skirts dragging through drifts and dropped to her knees beside him. His face had the blue-white color of hypothermia, lips tinged with frost. But vapor still clouded from his nose and mouth, small clouds that proved he was breathing, still alive, not dead yet. She pressed her fingers against his throat. Pulse. Weak, but steady. And his skin burned with fever despite the killing cold. Fever and hypothermia at once. That could kill him faster than either alone. "Senor Bridger, can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, unfocused, glazed, looking at something that wasn't there. "Catherine," he whispered. "Tell Catherine I tried. Tell her I'm sorry." Then his eyes closed and he was gone again, unconscious, dying in the snow, while his horses called and called for someone to save him. Rosa sat back on her heels, mind racing. Options: 1 ride to Silver Creek, fetch Dr. Webb, bring help. 90 minutes round trip minimum, probably longer if the doctor wasn't available. By then, hypothermia would have finished what the fever started. 2, try moving him herself. Get him inside, provide immediate care, and face the consequences of spending time alone with an unmarried man in a community where reputation meant everything. Such action could destroy the business she'd built through 4 years of careful, perfect behavior. Could eliminate any chance of surviving here. Could ruin her completely. The stallion screamed again. Rosa looked up, met the horse's desperate gaze across the corral. A magnificent bay, at least 16 hands pressed against the fence, with his head extended toward his fallen master. The animal's intelligence showed in those dark eyes. This wasn't random panic. This was deliberate communication, a creature who understood catastrophe and was demanding someone do something about it. Around him, 11 other horses added their voices. A pregnant mare pacing. An old gray standing vigil. Younger horses pressing close, creating a chorus of desperation. 12 animals depending on this man's survival. If he died, what happened to them? Would they be sold at auction? Separated, sent to buyers who might or might not care about their value? Or would they just be left here to starve? Rosa closed her eyes. She saw Antonio's face the morning he'd kissed her goodbye, heading down into the mine for a shift she'd asked him to take because she'd been tired. Hadn't wanted to cook breakfast, had snapped at him about money. He'd taken the extra shift to make her happy. And died because of it. She'd stood outside that mine listening to men scream for help, frozen with fear, telling herself someone else would handle it. Someone else would be brave. Someone else would risk something. Not her. Never her. She was too small, too scared, too worried about consequences. And Antonio had died anyway. "Not again," Rosa whispered. She stood, brushed snow from her skirts, and made her choice. "I'm staying," she said aloud, speaking to the unconscious man and the desperate horses, and perhaps to God himself. "Whatever it costs, I'm staying." Getting Nate inside nearly killed her. Rosa had never tried moving a full-grown man before. Never realized how heavy dead weight could be, how awkward a human body was when it couldn't help itself. She dragged him a few feet at a time, her back screaming, her arms shaking, sweat soaking through her dress despite the cold. The snow helped, provided some lubrication. But his boots kept catching on frozen ridges, and his coat absorbed moisture that added weight with every foot of progress. By the time she wrestled him through the front door and onto the sofa, Rosa's vision had grayed at the edges, and her lungs burned with every breath. But he was inside. That was step 1. Step 2 was not breaking down at what she saw. The house interior looked like a shrine to someone who'd stopped living 3 years ago. One place setting on the kitchen table. One coffee cup by the stove. Men's coats on the pegs, but nothing else. No feminine touches, no warmth, no sign that anyone actually lived here instead of just existing. Then Rosa's gaze landed on the mantelpiece, and her heart stopped. A wedding photograph stood above the fireplace, Nathaniel Bridger in formal black, beside a beautiful blonde woman in white silk. Both young and radiant, captured in a moment when the future had looked bright and full of possibility. Rosa moved closer, drawn by something familiar in the bride's delicate features. No, it couldn't be. "Sarah," she breathed. Sarah McKenna. Recognition hit like lightning, sudden, complete, devastating. Dr. McKenna's daughter from Santa Fe. Rosa's friend during one brief summer when both their families had lived in town. Sarah, who'd shared books and secrets and dreams of futures that seemed unlimited in their possibilities. Sarah, who'd stolen medicine from her father's office during the cholera epidemic, laudanum quinine willow bark, risking his professional standing to save Mexican families he refused to treat. Sarah, who'd saved Rosa's baby sister's life. Sarah, who'd disappeared when both families moved away, lost to time and distance and the chaos of frontier life. Sarah McKenna, who'd become Sarah Bridger, who'd married this man and made a life here in Montana Territory. Sarah McKenna, who was dead. Rosa found the confirmation beside the sofa, a Bible open to the 23rd Psalm, with a death date written in Nate's careful handwriting, September 15, 1882. 3 years and 3 months ago. The same month Antonio had died in the mine. Rosa knelt beside the sofa where Nate lay unconscious, and something inside her that had been locked down for 4 years finally cracked open. She cried. Not delicate tears, full sobs that shook her whole body, mourning for Sarah, who she'd never known was gone for Antonio, who'd died because of her selfishness for herself, standing here alone in a stranger's house, about to destroy her life because she couldn't ignore screaming horses. "Sarah," she whispered when she could speak again. "I remember everything you did for my family. Help me know what to do for your husband." Wind rattled the windows, and in that sound Rosa heard her answer. Not supernatural guidance, just her own conscience reminding her of debts owed and promises made. Sarah had risked everything to save people no one else would help. Rosa would honor that memory by saving the man Sarah had loved, whatever it cost. She stood, dried her tears, and got to work. Fire first. Rosa built up the flames in the stone hearth, feeding split logs to coals that had nearly died. The house needed warmth immediately. Nate's body temperature had dropped dangerously low during his time in the snow. Then medical care. Rosa found Sarah's supplies in a cabinet beside the kitchen, labeled jars of willow bark, yarrow, comfrey honey. A doctor's daughter knew healing, apparently. Had prepared for emergencies. Rosa heated water, made willow bark tea for the fever, and forced it between Nate's lips a spoonful at a time. Cleaned his head wound with honey and warm water. Bound it with strips torn from her own petticoat. Wrapped him in every quilt she could find. Added heated stones from the fire to warm him from outside while the tea worked from within. Then she turned to the horses. The barn was organized with military precision grain bins, labeled hay, stored properly, tools arranged by size and function. And on the wall beside the tack room, a notebook hung from a leather cord. Rosa opened it. Every page filled with Nate's careful handwriting. Feed schedules, veterinary notes, financial calculations. The record of a life lived with methodical attention to every detail. The most recent page held a list. Thunder, 3 scoops oats, plus molasses. Timothy hay, check hooves for Ice Duchess. 4 scoops pregnant extra nutrition. Calcium supplement. Watch for labor signs. Jackson. 2 scoops, plus warm water. Teeth, worn soft hay, only. The list continued for all 12 horses. Rosa had grown up around horses, had fed them, trained them, delivered their foals. She could do this. "All right, Hermoso," she said to Thunder as she approached his corral with the grain bucket. "Let's see if you'll trust me." The stallion's inspection lasted 10 seconds, dark eyes studying her face, her posture, the way she moved. Testing whether this stranger understood horses or was just pretending. Then he lowered his massive head and accepted her touch. Permission granted. The other horses followed Thunder's lead. Duchess approached cautiously. Jackson waited with dignified patience. The younger horses tested Rosa's authority with playful nips and attempts to steal grain. "No pequeña," Rosa told the 3-year-old mare firmly. "Wait your turn." By the time she finished, Rosa's dress was soaked with sweat and her muscles screamed from unaccustomed labor. But the horses were fed. Nate was warming by the fire, and Rosa had just destroyed her carefully built life to save both. The full weight of that realization hit her as she returned to the house, as she heated beef broth from Sarah's well-stocked pantry, as she sat in Sarah's rocking chair watching Nate's chest rise and fall. By now, Mrs. Henderson had gone to the mercantile and found it closed. Would assume Rosa had forgotten their appointment. By tomorrow, word would spread through Silver Creek that Rosa Delgado had been seen entering Nathaniel Bridger's ranch alone. By Christmas, the story would have grown the Mexican widow, the grieving widower, proof of what people had always suspected about those people. Her business would be finished, her reputation destroyed, everything gone. Antonio, Rosa whispered to her dead husband. I hope you understand why I did this. From the sofa, Nate stirred. His eyes opened slowly, consciousness returning in fragments as fever-bright eyes struggled to focus. Who? His voice came out hoarse, broken. Where's Catherine? Did someone feed the horses? Catherine, not Sarah. His mind was still lost in fever dreams. Rosa leaned close. Mr. Bridger, I'm Rosa Delgado. You collapsed this morning with fever. I found you in the snow and brought you inside. The horses are fed and safe. Understanding returned gradually as reality pushed through the fog. Mrs. Delgado. His voice strengthened slightly. You shouldn't be here. This isn't proper. People will say, let them say what they want. Rosa kept her voice calm, firm. You were dying. Your animals were starving. I helped. That's the end of it. Nate tried to sit up, masculine pride demanding he resume control. Rosa pressed him back with surprising strength. You'll stay exactly where you are until your fever breaks completely. I've managed everything according to your notebook specifications. I'm capable of continuing. You don't understand. Nate's protest came out weak. These horses have specific needs. Duchess is pregnant. Thunder can be dangerous if approached wrong. Jackson has... Rosa produced his notebook pages marked with her own observations written in precise script. Nate read them, amazement growing with each line. She'd identified everything: Thunder's protective behavior, Duchess's lameness, Jackson's dietary needs, even the young gelding's developing cough. How do you know so much about horses? My father bred them in New Mexico territory. I grew up reading animals before I could read books. Silence stretched between them, loaded with unasked questions. Finally, Nate spoke. You understand what you've risked by coming here. Your business depends on community trust. Being here alone with me could destroy your reputation completely. Rosa met his gaze steadily. Some risks are worth taking. My conscience matters more than community opinion. She paused, weighing whether to reveal the connection. And my debt to your wife's memory demands I preserve what she loved. Nate's breath caught. You knew Sarah. The hope in his voice was heartbreaking. So Rosa told him. About childhood friendship in Santa Fe. About Sarah stealing medicine during the cholera epidemic. About Sarah saving Rosa's baby sister when Dr. McKenna refused to treat Mexican families. She risked everything for people no one else would help, Rosa concluded. When my family moved away, we lost contact. I never knew she'd married you. Never knew she'd died until I saw the Bible today. Nate listened with tears streaming down his fever-flushed face. Sarah would approve of what you're doing. She'd be grateful someone with her courage is protecting what we built. Their conversation deepened, revealing unexpected common ground. Both widowed the same month. Both struggling with guilt, Nate for surviving when Catherine died, Rosa for sending Antonio to the mine shift that killed him. I asked him to take extra work because I was tired, Rosa confessed. Didn't want to cook breakfast. Snapped at him about bills. He took that shift to make me happy. And you've been punishing yourself ever since. Haven't you? Punishing yourself for not saving Catherine? The truth hung between them, too raw to deny. They were still talking when wagon wheels crunched on frozen ground outside. Rosa moved to the window. Company. 3 women in an expensive covered wagon. Nate struggled to sit up. That's Beatrice Thornton's rig. She's the banker's wife, considers herself the moral authority for the entire county. Then we'll face her together. The 3 women who emerged from the wagon represented concentrated social power. Beatrice Thornton at 55, commanding respect through her husband's financial empire. Ruth Morrison, the Methodist preacher's wife. Edith Cross, wife of the mercantile owner. All bundled in expensive coats, faces set with righteous concern. Rosa answered their knock before they could pound again. Mrs. Thornton, Mrs. Morrison, Mrs. Cross. Good morning. Beatrice carried a casserole dish as excuse for the visit, but her sharp eyes were already cataloging evidence. Rosa, dear. The condescension dripped like honey. We heard about this unfortunate situation and came immediately to offer assistance. There's no situation, Mrs. Thornton. Mr. Bridger was dying in the snow. I helped him. His animals were starving. I fed them. Ruth deployed scripture like a weapon. Christian charity is admirable, Rosa. However, we must also abstain from all appearance of evil. Your presence here creates appearances. Scripture also says I was sick and you visited me. Rosa's voice stayed level. Christ didn't mention checking social propriety first. Edith shifted to commercial pressure. Your sewing business depends on customer trust, Rosa. Several ladies have expressed concerns about continued patronage. Translation: cancel your orders or lose our business. Then I'll find new customers. Rosa didn't blink. Ones who value mercy over gossip. Beatrice's false sweetness evaporated. Rosa, you don't understand how serious this is. We've arranged for Billy Cartwright to handle the ranch work and Dr. Webb to make visits. Your services are no longer needed here. Continuing would suggest inappropriate motives. My motives are my concern. Mr. Bridger's welfare matters more than speculation. I'm staying. Then you're destroying your future in this community. If this community punishes mercy, maybe I don't belong here. The confrontation might have exploded, but Nate appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a chair, obviously weak but present. Ladies. His voice carried quiet authority despite his condition. Mrs. Delgado saved my life when I was completely unable to help myself. I won't permit her charity to be questioned in my home. Beatrice's expression hardened. Nathaniel, you don't understand the implications. I understand that my wife Sarah would have made the same choice Mrs. Delgado made. I understand that any decent person would have done exactly what she did. If that makes us both improper in your eyes, then maybe your definition of proper needs examination. Faced with united resistance, the three women retreated. But Beatrice delivered a parting shot. This isn't over. Consequences will follow. For both of you. After they left, silence settled heavy. I'm sorry, Nate said quietly. You'll lose everything because of me. I made my choice with open eyes. Rosa's voice didn't waver. No regrets. That evening, as Rosa completed the second feeding for the horses, Nate gathered courage to reveal the full scope of his crisis. Mrs. Delgado, Rosa, there's something you need to know before you commit any further to helping me. Rosa paused in her tea preparation, reading his tone. Tell me. This ranch is 3 months behind on mortgage payments. I owe Silas Thornton's bank $5,000. The payment's due January 15th, 6 weeks from now. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. What happens if you can't pay? Thornton seizes everything. The land, the horses, Sarah's legacy. All of it. Rosa absorbed this in silence, her practical mind already calculating options. What are your assets worth? The horses might bring $4,000 if sold to the right buyers, but winter makes finding those buyers nearly impossible. Thornton refuses payment extensions. Why is he being so inflexible? Honestly, I think he wants the ranch, not the money. Before Rosa could respond, hoofbeats approached a single rider moving fast, despite the treacherous conditions. A man burst through the door without knocking. Weathered face, mid-40s, dressed for hard riding. Nate, Mrs. Delgado. Tom Fletcher, Nate said weakly. What's wrong? But Rosa was staring at the man's face, recognition dawning. He had Sarah's eyes, Sarah's determined jaw, Sarah's way of moving. You're her brother, Rosa breathed. You're Sarah McKenna's brother. Fletcher stopped mid-stride, shock replacing urgency. How did you? I knew Sarah in Santa Fe, 20 years ago. I'd recognize her family anywhere. Fletcher's weathered face crumpled briefly before he regained control. Then you understand why I'm here. Why I've been watching over this ranch since she died." He turned to Nate. "Beatrice Thornton's already started spreading poison through town. She's contacted Rosa's customers, told them patronizing her business means approving scandalous behavior. 3 women have canceled orders." Rosa felt the blow but didn't flinch. "Furthermore," Fletcher continued grimly, "Silas Thornton is claiming your moral violations give him grounds for immediate foreclosure. He's saying you've violated mortgage clauses by allowing inappropriate cohabitation." Nate surged to his feet despite obvious weakness. "That's insane. This is emergency medical care." "Doesn't matter. Thornton wants this ranch and he's using every legal technicality to get it." Rosa's mind raced, connecting pieces. "Why does he want it so badly?" Fletcher hesitated, then decided they deserved the truth. "Montana and Pacific Railroad surveyed this valley last spring. This property sits on the only viable route through the mountains. Thornton has a contract to acquire strategic properties by year's end, by any means necessary." The full scope of the conspiracy became clear. "So he's been manufacturing foreclosures," Rosa said quietly, "using legal harassment to steal land for railroad money." "Can you prove it?" Nate demanded. "Not in time to stop him." Fletcher's expression was grim. "You've got 6 weeks before he can seize everything legally." After Fletcher left, Rosa and Nate sat in silence, processing the coordinated attack designed to destroy them both. "I'm sorry," Nate said finally. "You tried to help me, and this is what you get. Financial ruin, social destruction, all because you heard my horses screaming." Rosa stared into the fire, thinking about choices and consequences and debts that could never be fully repaid. "Sarah saved my sister's life 20 years ago," she said quietly. "Risked her father's career, her social standing, her future. For a Mexican family she barely knew." She turned to meet Nate's gaze. "If helping you destroys my business, so be it. If staying here ruins my reputation, I'll survive. But I won't dishonor Sarah's memory by abandoning what she loved when I have the power to save it." "How?" Nate's voice cracked. "We have 6 weeks and impossible obstacles." Rosa stood, moved to the window, where moonlight glinted off snow-covered pastures. "I have $320 in savings. You have horses worth $4,000. We have a telegraph office in Silver Creek that can reach buyers across 3 territories." She turned back to him. "Tomorrow morning we start planning how to save this ranch. Tonight we rest." "Rosa." "Tomorrow, Mr. Bridger. Tonight sleep." She settled into Sarah's rocking chair, wrapped in one of Sarah's quilts, and kept vigil while wind howled outside and the fire burned low. In the photograph above the mantel, Sarah smiled down at them, forever, young, forever hopeful, forever watching over what she'd loved. "I won't let them destroy this," Rosa promised her friend's memory. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, I won't let them win." Outside, the wind carried the promise of another storm. But inside Copper Ridge Ranch, 2 people who'd been broken by grief had found something neither expected. Not romance, not yet. Something better. Partnership. And maybe, just maybe, a reason to keep fighting when everything said surrender. Rosa woke to the sound of Nate falling. She was out of the rocking chair before her eyes fully opened, catching him halfway between the sofa and the kitchen table, where he'd been trying to reach his ranch notebook. "What are you doing?" She got her shoulder under his arm, taking his weight. "Need to check the feed schedule." His voice came out thick, fever still clouding his thoughts. "Duchess needs her calcium supplement. I wrote it down, but I can't remember if it's morning or evening, and if I get it wrong." "Morning, 2 tablespoons mixed with her oats. I already did it." Nate blinked at her confusion and relief, fighting for control of his face. "You read my notebook." "Every page. Twice." Rosa guided him back to the sofa. "I told you yesterday I'm capable of managing this ranch until you recover. That means I need to actually manage it, which means you need to stay down and let your body heal." "But, Mr. Bridger," Rosa's voice carried the same firm tone she'd used on Spirited Horses, If you die because you're too stubborn to rest, everything we're fighting for becomes meaningless. Sarah's legacy, your ranch, those 12 horses, all of it depends on you surviving the next few days. So sit down and let me handle things." Nate sat. Not because he wanted to, but because his legs had started shaking and his vision had grayed at the edges. "How long was I asleep?" 14 hours. Your fever broke around midnight. You've been sleeping naturally since then." Rosa pressed a hand to his forehead, checking temperature with practiced efficiency. "Still warm, but not dangerously so. The willow bark tea is working." She moved to the kitchen, began preparing something that smelled like heaven: eggs, bacon, fresh bread toasted over the fire. "When did you sleep?" Nate asked. "I'll sleep when you're well enough to stay conscious for more than 5 minutes." Rosa cracked another egg into the pan. "Until then, one of us needs to be alert, and it's not going to be you." Nate watched her move around Sarah's kitchen with confident familiarity, using Sarah's pans and Sarah's plates, and somehow not making it feel like violation. Making it feel like the house was being lived in again, instead of preserved as a shrine. "You cook like my wife did," he said quietly. "Efficient, no wasted motion." Rosa glanced over her shoulder. "Ranch women learn efficiency, or they don't survive. Your wife understood that." "She understood a lot of things." Nate's voice caught. "Including things I'm just now starting to figure out." "Like what?" "Like how grief can become comfortable if you're not careful. How working yourself to death feels easier than facing another empty day. How sometimes the only thing keeping you alive is a list of chores that need completing." Rosa set a plate in front of him, eggs cooked perfectly, bacon crisp, bread still steaming. "Eat. Then we'll talk about how to save your ranch." "Our ranch," Nate corrected without thinking, then stopped, startled by his own words. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." Rosa sat down across from him with her own plate. "You meant if we're fighting this battle together, we're both invested in the outcome. That's fair. That's partnership." The word hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to examine. They ate in silence for several minutes before Rosa spoke again. "I've been thinking about the foreclosure problem. About what Fletcher said regarding the railroad." "There's no solution." Nate pushed eggs around his plate. "Even if I could prove Thornton's working for the railroad, proving it requires lawyers and time we don't have. The mortgage is legal. The debt is real. January 15th is 6 weeks away. So we pay it." "With what money?" "Horse sales. You said Thunder alone might bring 1,500 to the right cavalry buyer. What about the others?" Nate had been through these calculations 100 times in the sleepless nights since Sarah's death. Duchess is worth maybe 1,200 because of her pregnancy, but only if the buyer believes she'll deliver a healthy foal. Jackson is retired, worth maybe 300 for breeding, but not work. The younger horses might bring 500 to 800 each, depending on training and bloodlines. So, 4,000 total if we find serious buyers. If. That's the problem. Serious buyers are in Denver, Cheyenne, Fort Robinson. Winter travel makes reaching them nearly impossible, and even if I could get the horses to market auction prices, run 30 to 50% below private sale values. Rosa stood, abruptly moved to where Nate's notebook hung on the wall, and began flipping through pages. "What are you looking for?" "Past sales records. Previous buyers. Anyone who might be interested in purchasing again." She found what she needed, 3 pages in a list of transactions from the past 5 years, complete with buyer names, addresses, and prices paid. Captain James Morrison, Fort Mackenzie. Purchased 3 cavalry mounts, 1873. Colonel Robert Chen, Fort Robinson. 2 stallions, 1874. Rosa's finger traced down the page. Marcus Webb, Private Ranch in Denver. Harrison Taylor, Wyoming Territory. Those sales happened years ago. Most of those men have probably moved on or don't need more horses. Or they remember the quality of what they bought and would be interested in purchasing again. Rosa turned to face him. "Mr. Bridger, you're thinking like a man who's already lost. I'm thinking like someone who needs to win. What's your plan?" Telegraph. "We send messages to every buyer you've ever sold to, plus cavalry posts, plus private breeders. We offer immediate inspection and purchase at fair market prices. We tell them the horses are available now this week before other buyers can compete." Nate sat up straighter, despite the dizziness that came with movement. That could work for creating interest, but inspection means bringing buyers here or transporting horses to them. Either way, we're back to the winter travel problem. "What about Garrison Station?" "What about it?" "It's 15 miles south of here, rail junction with telegraph access. What if we transport the horses there? Coordinate buyer arrivals by train, conduct inspections on-site with telegraph negotiations happening in real time." The idea crystallized in Nate's mind, revealing possibilities he'd been too grief-fogged to see before. Garrison Station has holding pens for livestock transfers. The station master, Tom Bradley, handles transactions regularly. If we could get the horses there and coordinate multiple buyers simultaneously, we could create competitive bidding, Rosa finished. Drive prices up instead of accepting whatever desperate sellers usually get. It's still risky. Weather could turn. Buyers might not respond. We'd be committing everything to a single event with no backup plan. We're already committed. Rosa's voice carried steel. Fletcher said Thornton is claiming moral violations give him grounds for immediate foreclosure. That means we don't have 6 weeks, we might have days before he moves legally. We need money fast, and this is the only way to get it. Nate studied her face, seeing determination that matched Sarah's when she'd decided something mattered enough to fight for. If we do this, you understand you're risking more than just money. Being associated with me publicly conducting business transactions on my behalf, Beatrice Thornton will use it as proof of everything she's been saying about improper conduct. Let her try. Rosa met his gaze without flinching. I'm already ruined in her eyes. Might as well be ruined doing something that actually matters. You're sure? Mr. Bridger, the day I heard your horses screaming and decided to turn my wagon around, I chose which side of this fight I was on. Everything since then is just following through on that choice. Nate felt something shift in his chest. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Recognition that this woman understood loss and guilt and the choice to keep fighting anyway. That she'd looked at his broken life and Sarah's legacy and decided both were worth saving. All right, he said quietly. Let's save this ranch. By noon, Rosa had composed 6 telegraph messages. She'd found Sarah's correspondence desk in the bedroom, a beautiful oak piece with carefully organized papers showing how methodically Sarah had managed ranch business. Rosa used Sarah's best stationery writing in English, so precise it could have come from a lawyer's office. Read this, she said, handing the first draft to Nate. He read aloud. Captain Morrison, Fort Mackenzie, offering immediate purchase opportunity, superior cavalry mounts, Arabian bloodlines, winter-ready condition, inspection available, Garrison Station, December 28th, telegraph response by December 24th if interested, Nathaniel Bridger, Copper Ridge Ranch. It's perfect, professional but urgent, creates deadline pressure without seeming desperate. That's the goal. Desperate sellers get terrible prices. Professional sellers with time-sensitive opportunities get fair value. Rosa handed him 5 more drafts. These go to everyone in your records who purchased horses, plus 3 cavalry posts you haven't sold to before, plus 2 private breeders in Colorado territory. 10 messages total. More if you can think of other potential buyers. The telegraph office charges by the word, but your $320 should cover transmission costs and still leave funds for emergency supplies. My $320? I'm investing in this partnership. Rosa's tone allowed no argument. You provide the horses and expertise. I provide capital and business strategy. When we succeed, not if, when we split costs and profits equally. Rosa, I can't let you risk your life savings on... You can, and you will, because it's not your decision to make. It's mine. She gathered the messages, folded them carefully. I'm taking these to Silver Creek now. The telegraph office closes at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve, which gives us barely enough time if I ride instead of taking the wagon. You're going alone. Unless you're healthy enough to ride 15 miles in 20 below weather, yes. I'm going alone. People will see you. Will know you're handling my business affairs. That'll just give Beatrice more ammunition. Good. Let her waste ammunition on battles that don't matter while we win the war that does. Rosa was halfway to the door when Nate spoke again. Rosa, wait. She turned back. Thank you. For all of this. For staying when you should have run. For fighting when most people would have surrendered. For believing this ranch is worth saving when I'd stopped believing it myself. Rosa's expression softened slightly. Sarah believed in this place. Believed in you. That's worth fighting for. Besides, a hint of a smile appeared. I've never been good at surrender. Wait. She was gone before Nate could respond, leaving him alone with the fire and his thoughts and the photograph of Sarah watching from above the mantel. I think you'd like her, he told his dead wife. She's stubborn as you were, brave as you were, probably crazier than both of us combined for taking this risk. Sarah's photograph smiled back, silent and unchanging. But for the first time in 3 years, Nate didn't feel like he was talking to a ghost. He felt like he was making a promise to someone who was still somehow present, still watching, still wanting him to keep living. The telegraph office in Silver Creek occupied a corner of the general store separated by a wooden partition that provided minimal privacy for sensitive communications. Thomas Henderson, the telegraph operator, looked up when Rosa entered, and his friendly expression shifted to something more cautious. Mrs. Delgado, I heard you were otherwise occupied. Translation: I heard you're destroying your reputation at Nathaniel Bridger's ranch. Mr. Henderson. Rosa set the messages on his counter with calm precision. I need these transmitted immediately to the addresses specified. I have cash to cover costs. Henderson picked up the first message, read it, then looked at Rosa with new interest. These are business communications, horse sales. Time-sensitive business communications. Can you transmit them today, or should I try the station at Garrison? I can transmit them. Henderson's tone shifted to professional courtesy. These addresses, Fort McKenzie, Fort Robinson, Denver responses could start arriving within hours if recipients are available. Do you want replies delivered to Copper Ridge Ranch or held here? Delivered to the ranch. Mr. Bridger is recovering from severe illness and can't travel to collect messages. Henderson began calculating transmission costs, his fingers moving across an abacus with practiced speed. Total comes to $18.40 for all 10 messages. Rosa counted out exact change from the leather pouch she'd brought. Can you also send word to Tom Bradley at Garrison Station, inform him we may need livestock holding pens on December 28th for potential sales transactions? I can include that message for an additional $1.20. Do it. While Henderson began tapping out the first message in Morse code, Rosa became aware of voices on the other side of the partition. Women's voices, discussing her. I still can't believe she's actually staying there. That was Edith Cross, the mercantile owner's wife. Alone, with a man she barely knows, for days now. Well, what did you expect? Ruth Morrison, the preacher's wife. These people have different moral standards. They always have. It's not just improper, it's dangerous. Beatrice Thornton's voice cut through the others like a knife. Nathaniel Bridger owns valuable property that certain interests have been trying to acquire. Now suddenly a Mexican woman appears, installs herself in his house while he's helpless with illness, and starts conducting his business affairs. It's suspicious at minimum, predatory at worst. Rosa's hands clenched on the counter edge, but she kept her expression neutral. Henderson glanced at her apologetically, mouthing, "Sorry," while continuing to transmit. The women continued, apparently unaware Rosa could hear every word. "I've already spoken with several of her customers," Beatrice continued. "Made it clear that patronizing her services means endorsing scandalous behavior. 3 have already canceled orders. The others will follow." "What about the men?" Edith asked. "Surely some of the ranchers will say something. Fletcher seemed quite defensive of her yesterday." "Fletcher is Sarah's brother." Beatrice's voice dripped contempt. "Of course he's emotional about anyone connected to that ranch, but emotion doesn't change facts. That woman has inserted herself into a vulnerable man's life at the exact moment when legal proceedings could benefit someone willing to manipulate the situation." "Are you suggesting she's after his money?" Ruth sounded scandalized and fascinated simultaneously. "I'm suggesting the timing is remarkably convenient. Nathaniel behind on mortgage payments, facing foreclosure, suddenly a woman appears who just happens to have business expertise and cash savings. It's practically a confidence scheme." Rosa had heard enough. She stepped around the partition, causing all 3 women to freeze mid-conversation. "Good afternoon, ladies." Rosa's voice carried the dangerous calm of someone who'd been pushed exactly far enough. "I couldn't help overhearing your concerns about my character and motives. Since you're discussing me anyway, perhaps you'd like to share those concerns directly." Beatrice recovered first false sweetness, sliding back into place. "Rosa dear, we were simply expressing worry for your welfare and reputation." "No, you weren't." Rosa cut her off. "You were organizing a coordinated campaign to destroy my business and implying I'm a criminal targeting Mr. Bridger for financial gain. So let's be honest about what's actually happening here." "We're concerned about impropriety," Ruth began. "You're concerned about control." Rosa's gaze moved between the 3 women. "About maintaining social hierarchies where Mexican women know their place and don't dare challenge your authority. About punishing anyone who prioritizes mercy over your approval." "How dare you?" Beatrice stepped forward. "How dare I, what save a man's life, feed his animals, conduct legitimate business on behalf of someone too ill to manage it himself? Which of those actions violates Christian principles you claim to represent? It's not the actions, it's the appearance. Then your problem is with appearances, not morality. And if appearances matter more than actual right and wrong, that says everything about your values and nothing about mine." Silence fell, broken only by Henderson's telegraph key continuing its rhythmic tapping in the background. Edith spoke finally, her voice uncertain. "Mrs. Delgado, surely you understand how this looks. An unmarried woman alone with an unmarried man. Providing medical care during life-threatening emergency. If that's scandalous in your community has lost its way." Rosa turned back toward Henderson's counter, then paused. "One more thing, Mrs. Thornton. You mentioned certain interests trying to acquire Mr. Bridger's property. Would those interests include your husband's bank, or the railroad company he's working with to force foreclosures on strategic land?" Beatrice's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think your moral crusade against me has nothing to do with propriety and everything to do with eliminating someone who's interfering with a land grab. But here's what you need to understand. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not backing down. And if you or your husband try legal action against Mr. Bridger based on false moral claims, I will make very sure everyone knows about the railroad conspiracy. That's slander. It's truth. And truth is an absolute defense against slander." Rosa collected her receipt from Henderson. "Good day, ladies. I have a ranch to help save." She walked out with her head high, leaving 3 stunned women and 1 telegraph operator trying very hard not to smile. Rosa was halfway back to Copper Ridge when she started shaking. Not from cold. From delayed reaction to confrontation that could have gone catastrophically wrong. She'd just threatened the most powerful woman in Silver Creek, had publicly accused the banker's wife of conspiracy, had burned every remaining bridge between herself and the community she'd worked 4 years to establish herself in. "What have I done?" she whispered to Pablo, who flicked his ears back sympathetically. "Antonio, What have I done? But even as she asked the question, Rosa knew the answer. She'd chosen which side of the line she stood on. She'd chosen partnership over safety. She'd chosen to fight instead of surrender. And there was no going back now. The sun was setting by the time she reached Copper Ridge Ranch, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of rose and gold that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Nate was waiting on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, but visibly anxious. "You were gone 5 hours. I was starting to worry something happened." Something did happen. Rosa dismounted her legs, stiff from the long ride. "I confronted Beatrice Thornton in front of half the town and accused her husband of railroad conspiracy." Nate's eyes widened. "You did what?" "I got angry. Said things that needed saying but probably shouldn't have been said publicly." Rosa handed Pablo's reins to Nate. "I may have just made everything worse. Or you may have just put them on notice that we know what they're doing and we're not intimidated." Nate led Pablo toward the barn. "Come inside. Tell me everything." Over dinner, stew Rosa had prepared from Sarah's pantry stores, she recounted the entire confrontation, including Beatrice's implications about predatory motives. "She thinks you're after my money." Nate's laugh came out bitter. "What money? I'm 3 months from foreclosure." "She thinks I'm manipulating you while you're vulnerable, using your illness and grief to gain control of valuable property." "That's insane." "Is it?" Rosa met his gaze across the table. "Think about how it looks from outside. Mysterious Mexican woman appears exactly when you're at your lowest point, installs herself in your house, starts conducting your business. Coincidentally, has cash savings that might delay foreclosure. If I were Beatrice Thornton, I'd be suspicious too." "But you're not. You're helping because—" Nate stopped, uncertainty flickering across his face. "Why are you helping? Really?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Rosa could have given the easy answer, the safe answer. Could have said she was repaying debt to Sarah's memory, honoring her friend's legacy. Instead, she chose truth. "I'm helping because the day Antonio died, I stood outside that mine, listening to men scream for help, and I did nothing. I was too scared, too worried about what might happen if I tried to help and failed. So I stood there. And Antonio died. And I've spent 4 years knowing I'm the kind of person who hears someone dying and does nothing." Her voice broke slightly, but she kept going. "When I heard your horses screaming, I had a choice. Be that person again, the one who does nothing, or be someone different, someone braver, someone who acts instead of freezing." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I'm not helping you because of Sarah, though I loved her. I'm helping because I need to prove to myself that I'm not the coward who let Antonio die." Silence stretched between them. Then Nate spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I wasn't just doing chores that morning. I was hoping the cold would make the decision for me. Hoping I'd just not wake up. That the horses would need me enough to get me through one more day. But that eventually, one morning, I'd be too sick or too tired or too cold, and it would just be over." Rosa's breath caught. "When you found me," Nate continued. "When you stayed, when you fought Beatrice and Fletcher's revelation about the railroad, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to want it saved. Showed me that Sarah's legacy was worth protecting. That I was worth the effort, even when I didn't believe it." He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that Rosa could feel the warmth. "So if we're being honest about why we're doing this, I'm fighting because you showed me how. Because you're brave enough for both of us. And because watching you refuse to surrender makes me remember who I used to be before grief broke me." They sat there in Sarah's kitchen, two broken people who'd found unexpected strength in each other's determination. "We're quite a pair," Rosa said finally, a hint of a smile appearing. "The widow who let her husband die, and the widower who wanted to die himself. Trying to save a ranch neither of us can afford to lose. against enemies with more money and power than we'll ever have, with a plan that probably won't work. In 6 weeks, during Montana winter, they looked at each other, and suddenly, impossibly, they were both laughing. Not happy laughter, not carefree, but the laughter of people who'd looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. "We're completely crazy," Nate managed between laughs. "Completely," Rosa agreed. "And we're doing it anyway." The laughter faded, but something remained: partnership forged in honesty instead of pretense, strength built on mutual brokenness instead of false perfection. "The first telegraph responses should start arriving tomorrow," Rosa said, returning to practical matters. "If we get enough positive replies, we'll need to coordinate transportation to Garrison Station, set up inspection schedules, prepare negotiation strategies." "Rosa." "What?" "It's Christmas Eve. Can we take one evening to not talk about strategies and schedules?" Rosa paused, considering. "What should we talk about instead?" "Tell me about Sarah, about the girl you knew before she became the woman I married. I want to hear stories from someone who knew her when she was young and fearless and stealing medicine from her father's office." So Rosa told him. About Sarah climbing through her window at midnight to bring soup when Rosa's sister was sick. About Sarah standing up to older boys who'd been harassing Mexican children at the market. About Sarah's determination that everyone deserved care, regardless of race or ability to pay. She used to say that mercy wasn't about deserving, Rosa remembered. It was about need. If someone needed help and you could provide it, that was enough. The rest was just excuses. "That sounds exactly like her," Nate said softly. She never saw obstacles, only people who needed helping and practical ways to help them. They talked deep into the night, sharing stories that brought Sarah alive between them, not as a ghost haunting the house, but as a real person who'd shaped them both and whose legacy they were fighting to preserve. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering the tracks Rosa had made that morning with pristine white. Inside Copper Ridge Ranch, two people who'd been drowning in separate grief found unexpected comfort in shared memories and common purpose. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something neither had expected, something that felt like hope. The first telegraph response arrived at dawn on Christmas morning. Rosa heard hoofbeats approaching and was at the door before the rider could dismount. Young Billy Cartwright, the neighbor boy who worked odd jobs around the territory, held out a yellow envelope with hands red from cold. "Telegraph from Fort McKenzie, Mrs. Delgado. Mr. Henderson said it was urgent." Rosa pressed a silver dollar into his palm. "Wait. There may be a reply needed." She tore open the envelope, her heart hammering. "What does it say?" Nate appeared behind her, moving better than yesterday, but still weak. Rosa read aloud. "Captain Morrison interested. Can inspect December 28th Garrison Station. Seeking 3 cavalry mounts, quality confirmed. What horses available, and asking prices. He's interested." Nate's voice carried disbelief and hope in equal measure. Morrison actually responded. "One buyer isn't enough. We need multiple interested parties to drive competitive bidding." Rosa was already composing a reply in her head. "Billy, tell Mr. Henderson to send this response: Thunder available 16 hands, Arabian bloodline cavalry trained. Duchess available, if full delivery timing acceptable. Jackson available for breeding program. Inspection. December 28th confirmed. Prices negotiable based on inspection." Billy repeated the message back carefully, then rode off toward Silver Creek at a gallop. "You're not including specific prices?" Nate asked. "Never show your cards first. Let them make opening offers based on what they see. If we name prices too early, we limit our negotiating room." Rosa moved to the kitchen, began preparing coffee with the efficient movements that marked everything she did. Besides, if other responses arrive showing interest, we can mention competing buyers to drive Morrison's offer higher. "You've done this before, negotiated sales." Antonio and I ran a small trading business before the mine. Textiles, mostly some livestock. I learned that the person who names a price first usually loses. Rosa poured coffee, handed Nate a cup. You eat breakfast. I'll handle the morning feeding. You're not strong enough yet for barn work. Rosa. No arguments. Partnership means trusting each other's expertise. Your expertise is horses. Mine is negotiation, and not dying from fever complications because you're too stubborn to rest. Nate accepted the coffee, something like a smile appearing. You're very bossy for someone who showed up 3 days ago as a stranger. 3 days ago you were dying in the snow. Now you're complaining about my bossiness. I call that progress. She was halfway to the door when Nate spoke again. Rosa, Merry Christmas. The words stopped her cold. She'd forgotten entirely what day it was, too focused on survival and strategy to mark holiday calendars. Merry Christmas, Mr. Bridger. Nate, if we're partners, you should probably use my name. Nate. Rosa tested the name, found it fit easier than expected. Merry Christmas. Outside, the world had transformed overnight into a crystalline wonderland that would have been beautiful if Rosa had time to appreciate beauty. Fresh snow covered everything, erasing yesterday's tracks and yesterday's confrontations, offering the illusion of new beginnings. Thunder greeted her with his usual inspection dark eyes, studying her face, checking whether this strange woman still deserved his trust. Rosa passed whatever test he administered because the stallion lowered his head and accepted her touch. Merry Christmas, Hermoso, she murmured, measuring his grain. Today might be the day we figure out how to save your home. The morning feeding went smoothly until Rosa reached Duchess's corral and found the pregnant mare lying down instead of standing at her feed station. Duchess, up, girl. Time for breakfast. The mare didn't move. Rosa's heart kicked into overdrive. She climbed through the fence rails, approached slowly, reading the mare's body language for signs of distress. Duchess's eyes were alert, but her breathing came in shallow pants. Her sides showed the taut distension of advanced pregnancy, but something about her posture suggested discomfort beyond normal expectation. Easy, Mama. Let me check you. Rosa ran her hands along Duchess's barrel, felt the tight bands of muscle that shouldn't be there. Not yet. Not for another 3 weeks, according to Nate's records. Oh no. You're not in labor. It's too early. But Duchess's body told a different story. The mare was absolutely in early labor, her body preparing to deliver a foal that might not be developed enough to survive premature birth. Rosa ran back to the house, burst through the door without knocking. Nate, Duchess is in labor. Nate was on his feet instantly despite obvious dizziness. That's impossible. She's got 3 more weeks. Tell that to Duchess. She's down in her stall. Contractions started, breathing rapid. Damn. Nate grabbed his coat. Early delivery, especially in this cold, the foal might not make it. We need to get her into the barn where it's warmer, get heat lamps set up, prepare for complications. They moved together, Nate directing despite his weakness, Rosa providing the physical strength he lacked. Between them, they managed to coax Duchess into standing, walked her carefully into the barn's largest stall, where Rosa had spread extra straw for insulation. How long has it been since you delivered a foal? Nate asked, setting up the heat lamps. 12 years, but some things you don't forget. Rosa washed her hands in the heated water bucket, testing Duchess's progress with practiced efficiency. She's dilating properly. Contractions are regular. If the foal is positioned correctly, nature should handle most of it. And if it's not positioned correctly, then we'll handle it. One problem at a time. They settled into waiting, that peculiar combination of tension and patience that came with attending births. Nate checked Duchess's vital signs, while Rosa prepared clean towels, iodine for the umbilical cord, everything they might need if complications arose. I was thinking, Nate said during a quiet moment, about what you said last night, about needing to prove you're not a coward. I shouldn't have said that. It was honest. And it made me realize something. Nate adjusted the heat lamp position. I've spent 3 years thinking grief was my cross to bear, my punishment for not saving Catherine. But maybe grief was just my excuse to stop trying. Grief isn't an excuse, Nate. It's real. It's brutal. It is, but at some point grief becomes comfortable, becomes the story you tell yourself about why you can't move forward, why you can't fight, why surrender feels easier than hope. Duchess groaned, contractions intensifying. Here we go. Rosa moved to the mare's head, speaking in soothing Spanish while monitoring progress. Easy, Mama. You're doing perfect. Just breathe. I see hooves, Nate reported from his position. Front legs looks properly positioned. This might go smoothly. It didn't go smoothly. The foal was positioned correctly, but small, dangerously small for this stage of development. Rosa worked with Duchess through each contraction, while Nate prepared to receive the foal, his hands steady, despite the fever weakness that still plagued him. Come on, Duchess, Rosa urged. One more big push. You can do this. The mare gave everything she had, and suddenly the foal slid free in a rush of fluid and membrane. A filly, tiny and dark and terrifyingly still. She's not breathing. Nate said, his voice tight with controlled panic. Rosa, she's not... Clear the airways. Rosa was already moving, grabbing clean towels. Rub her down hard, stimulate circulation. Come on, little one, come on. They worked together with desperate efficiency, clearing membrane from the filly's nostrils, rubbing her small body with rough towels to jumpstart breathing, willing life into this fragile creature that had arrived too early into a world too cold. Nothing, Nate said after 30 seconds that felt like hours. She's not responding. Keep rubbing. Don't stop. Rosa leaned close to the filly's muzzle, breathed gently into tiny nostrils, the way her father had taught her decades ago. Breathe, pequeña. Breathe. 1 breath. 2. 3. The filly's rib cage moved suddenly, a gasping inhalation that sounded like thunder in the quiet barn. She's breathing. Nate's voice cracked with relief. Rosa, she's... The filly gasped again, stronger this time, and then her eyes opened, dark and confused, but alive. Definitely alive. Rosa sat back, her whole body shaking. Get her under the heat lamp. Keep her warm. Duchess needs to bond with her immediately, or rejection could kill her as surely as the cold. They positioned the foal where Duchess could reach her, watched as the exhausted mare began the instinctive process of cleaning and claiming her baby. The filly responded, nuzzling toward her mother with weak but determined movements. She's going to make it, Nate said quietly, wonder in his voice. They're both going to make it. Rosa allowed herself one moment of pure relief before practical concerns reasserted themselves. She's going to make it if we keep her warm and monitor her constantly for the next 72 hours. Premature foals can crash suddenly. We'll need round-the-clock observation. We'll manage it together. Nate met her gaze over the tiny filly. Partners, remember. Partners. They were still watching Duchess and her new daughter when hoofbeats approached again. Multiple horses this time, and voices Rosa recognized with sinking certainty. Stay with them, she told Nate. I'll handle whatever this is. Rosa emerged from the barn to find not Billy Cartwright, but a delegation. Beatrice Thornton, in her expensive covered wagon, accompanied by Sheriff Tom Whitmore, and 2 men Rosa didn't recognize, official-looking men in dark suits carrying leather portfolios. Mrs. Delgado? Beatrice's voice dripped false sympathy. How unfortunate to intrude on Christmas morning. But I'm afraid urgent business requires immediate attention. Rosa kept her expression neutral, despite the dread pooling in her stomach. What business? Sheriff Whitmore stepped forward, his weathered face showing genuine reluctance. Mrs. Delgado, I've been instructed to serve notice regarding Mr. Bridger's mortgage situation. These gentlemen are from Thornton Banking and the Territorial Court. One of the suited men produced documents. Mrs. Delgado is Mr. Nathaniel Bridger, present on the premises. He's attending to ranch business. What's this about? We're here to serve formal notice of accelerated foreclosure proceedings. Due to documented moral violations of mortgage covenant terms, Thornton Banking is exercising its contractual right to demand immediate full payment of outstanding debt. The words hit like physical blows. Accelerated foreclosure, immediate payment. "You can't do that," Rosa said, her voice steady, despite rage building behind her ribs. "Moral violations based on medical emergency care don't constitute breach of contract. The nature of your relationship with Mr. Bridger is irrelevant," the banker continued smoothly. "What matters is that you, an unmarried woman, have been residing on the property continuously for 4 days, conducting business transactions on Mr. Bridger's behalf, and presenting yourself as his representative in financial matters. These actions create the appearance of cohabitation and common law marriage claims that violate explicit mortgage terms." "That's insane, Mrs. Delgado." Beatrice stepped forward, false concern perfected. "Surely you understand how this looks. A woman of your background, installing herself in a vulnerable man's home, conducting his affairs, positioning herself to benefit from his property. My husband has a fiduciary responsibility to protect the bank's interests against potential fraud." Fraud. Rosa's voice could have cut glass. "I've been saving this man's life while you've been plotting to steal his land for railroad money. Who's committing fraud here?" Sheriff Whitmore winced. "Mrs. Delgado, I'd advise against making accusations you can't prove. I can prove it. Fletcher told us about the Montana and Pacific Railroad survey, about Thornton's contract to acquire strategic properties, about the systematic foreclosures designed to clear land for rail development." The second banker spoke for the first time. "Speculation and hearsay aren't evidence. What is evidence is your documented presence on this property, engaging in behaviors that violate mortgage covenants. Mr. Bridger has 72 hours to pay the full outstanding debt of $5,300, including accelerated penalties, or the property will be seized." 72 hours. Rosa's mind raced calculating. "That's December 28th. The same day we've scheduled horse sales at Garrison Station." "How convenient," Beatrice smiled. "Though I doubt livestock sales will generate sufficient funds, perhaps Mr. Bridger should consider our generous offer to purchase the property outright for fair market value, avoiding the embarrassment of public foreclosure." "How much is your generous offer?" $3,000. Rosa laughed without humor. "This property is worth $10,000 at minimum. You're offering 30 cents on the dollar and calling it generosity." "We're offering Mr. Bridger a dignified exit from an untenable situation," Beatrice countered. "The alternative is public foreclosure auction sale that might bring even less and permanent financial ruin. $3,000 allows him to pay debts and start fresh elsewhere. Get off this property." Rosa's voice dropped to dangerous quiet. "Now. We're simply serving legal notice." "You're attempting to intimidate and coerce. Sheriff Whitmore, are these men required to remain here for legal service to be valid?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "No, ma'am. Once documents are served, they're free to leave." "Then they're leaving. Now. Before I start discussing railroad conspiracies and fraudulent foreclosure schemes with every newspaper between here and Helena." The bankers exchanged glances, gathered their portfolios. "The documents have been served. Mr. Bridger has 72 hours. After that, the property becomes property of Thornton Banking pending auction." They departed with Beatrice, leaving Rosa standing in the snow, holding papers that represented everything they'd been fighting against. Sheriff Whitmore lingered. "Mrs. Delgado, for what it's worth, I think what you're doing here is decent. But Beatrice Thornton's not wrong about how it looks. And in territorial courts, appearances matter as much as facts. Then the courts need better judges." "Maybe so, but that doesn't change your situation." Whitmore mounted his horse. 72 hours isn't much time. If you're planning something, you'd better move fast." After he left, Rosa stood alone in the yard, the foreclosure notice heavy in her hands. 72 hours, 3 days to generate $5,000, while attending to a premature foal that required constant monitoring. while coordinating buyer arrivals and inspection schedules, while managing a ranch and nursing Nate back to health. Impossible. The word whispered through her mind like poison. No, Rosa said aloud. Not impossible, just difficult. There's a difference. She returned to the barn where Nate was sitting with Duchess and the filly, his face showing exhaustion, but also something like peace. Rosa, look at her. She's nursing, already trying to stand. She's going to... He stopped seeing Rosa's expression. What happened? Rosa handed him the foreclosure notice. Nate read it once, then again, his face draining of what little color the fever had left him. 72 hours. They accelerated the deadline. Using me as justification, claiming moral violations based on my presence here. This is my fault. If I'd just died in the snow like I was supposed to, you wouldn't be... Stop. Rosa cut him off sharply. That kind of thinking helps no one. We don't have time for guilt or blame. We have 3 days to generate $5,000, and we're going to do exactly that. How? Even if every buyer responds positively, even if sales go perfectly coordinating everything in 72 hours, is difficult but not impossible. Rosa pulled out her mental calculations. Captain Morrison already responded. If we get 2 more confirmed buyers by end of day tomorrow, we can move horses to Garrison Station on the 27th, conduct inspections and sales on the 28th, return with payment before the deadline expires. That's assuming perfect conditions. No weather delays, no transportation problems, no buyers backing out. Then we'll pray for perfect conditions. Rosa met his gaze. Or we'll fight through imperfect ones. But we're not surrendering. Not after everything we've done to get this far. Nate looked at her for a long moment, and Rosa saw something shift in his expression. Not love, not yet, but something deeper than partnership. Something like recognition that they were bound together, now not just by circumstance, but by choice, by shared determination to protect what Sarah had loved. All right, he said quietly. Let's fight. They spent Christmas evening in the barn, taking turns monitoring the filly while planning logistics for the most important 3 days of their lives. Rosa made lists, transportation requirements, buyer coordination schedules, backup plans for every imaginable complication. If weather delays us getting to Garrison, she calculated, we'll need to add 6 hours to timeline, which means departing before dawn on the 27th instead of morning departure. If buyers back out, do we have secondary options? Tom Bradley at Garrison Station handles livestock transfers regularly. He'll know local buyers who might be interested if our telegraph contacts fail. Rosa made another note. Not ideal, but better than nothing. And if we don't raise enough? Silence stretched between them, heavy with the question neither wanted to voice. Then we'll have saved Duchess and this filly at least, Rosa said finally. Given them a chance they wouldn't have had. That's worth something. It's worth everything. Nate reached across the space between them, not quite touching Rosa's hand, but close enough that she felt the warmth. Whatever happens, Rosa, I want you to know you gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What? Hope. The belief that fighting for things still matters. That tomorrow might actually be worth seeing. His voice roughened with emotion. Sarah would have liked you. Would have recognized in you what I'm just starting to see. What's that? Someone who refuses to break no matter how hard the world pushes. Someone who chooses courage even when every rational reason says surrender. Someone worth fighting beside. Rosa felt something crack open in her chest, some protective wall she'd built around her heart after Antonio's death. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The recognition that this man understood her in ways no one had since she'd become a widow struggling alone. We should rest, she said, her voice not quite steady. Tomorrow we'll need clear heads and steady hands. You rest. I'll take first watch with Duchess. Nate, you're still recovering. Partners, remember. You've been carrying everything for 3 days. Let me carry something tonight. Rosa wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like undertow. She hadn't slept more than a few hours since finding Nate in the snow hadn't allowed herself to feel the accumulated weight of crisis and confrontation and fear. 2 hours. She compromised. Then you wake me for second watch. Deal. Rosa returned to the house, climbed the stairs to the bedroom, where Sarah's things still waited in careful preservation. She'd been avoiding this room, sleeping in the rocking chair downstairs to avoid the intimacy of using Sarah's private space. But tonight, exhaustion won over propriety. Rosa lay down on Sarah's bed, surrounded by Sarah's books, and Sarah's pressed flowers, and Sarah's faded lavender scent, still somehow present in the quilts. "Sarah," she whispered into the darkness. "If you're watching, if you can hear me, somehow help me save what you loved. Help me protect what you built. Help me keep Nate safe, because he's worth saving, and this ranch is worth fighting for." Sleep took her before she could say more, dragging her down into dreams, where Antonio and Sarah stood together beside Duchess's stall, watching her with expressions she couldn't quite read. She woke 6 hours later to find Nate shaking her shoulder gently. "Rosa, wake up." "What's wrong? Is it Duchess the filly?" "They're fine, both sleeping peacefully." Nate held out a yellow envelope. "This arrived an hour ago, special delivery from the telegraph office." Rosa tore it open with shaking hands, read the message twice to make sure she understood correctly. "Colonel Chen from Fort Robinson," she breathed. "He's interested. 2 cavalry stallions needed immediately. Can inspect December 28th. Will pay premium for quality confirmed." "That's 2 confirmed buyers," Nate said. "Morrison and Chen. If we can get one more, we will." Rosa stood, energy returning despite the abbreviated sleep. "We're going to do this, Nate. We're going to save this ranch. And if we don't, then we'll go down fighting, which is more than either of us was doing 3 days ago." They looked at each other in the pre-dawn darkness of Sarah's bedroom, 2 people who'd been broken by loss and found unexpected strength in shared determination. "Merry Christmas, Rosa. Merry Christmas, Nate." Outside, new snow began to fall, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see whether courage and desperation could triumph over money and power. Waiting to see if 2 broken people could save what one good woman had built. Waiting for dawn and whatever it might bring. The 3rd telegraph arrived at noon on December 26th, delivered by Billy Cartwright, whose horse was lathered despite the cold. "Mr. Henderson said this one's important, Mrs. Delgado. Real important." Rosa gave him $2 silver this time. "Wait for my reply." She read the message aloud to Nate, who was finally strong enough to help with barn work, though Rosa still watched him like a hawk for signs of relapse. "Marcus Webb, private breeder, Denver. Interested in breeding stock, specifically pregnant mares with quality bloodlines. Can inspect December 28th. Prepared to pay premium prices for confirmed Arabian genetics." Nate leaned against the barn wall, something like disbelief crossing his face. "That's 3 buyers, 3 confirmed inspections. Rosa, this might actually work." "It will work." Rosa's mind was already moving to logistics. "Billy, tell Mr. Henderson to confirm Webb's inspection appointment and send this message to Tom Bradley at Garrison Station. Need livestock holding facilities, December 27th through 28th. 3 confirmed buyers arriving. Require telegraph access for price negotiations. Will compensate for accommodation." Billy repeated it back, then hesitated. "Mrs. Delgado, there's something else. Mr. Henderson wanted me to tell you that Mrs. Thornton's been at the telegraph office all morning, sending messages to Denver and Cheyenne. He couldn't read them all, but he caught words like fraud investigation and territorial marshal." Rosa felt ice slide down her spine. "She's trying to interfere with the sales." "Looks like it. Mr. Henderson said he wanted you to know so you'd be prepared." After Billy left, Rosa turned to Nate with grim determination. "Beatrice is going to try to stop this. She'll claim fraud, question your legal right to sell anything to delay transactions past the deadline." "Can she do that legally?" "Legally, probably not. But she can create enough confusion to scare buyers away or delay inspections. In territorial courts, Accusations alone can freeze transactions pending investigation. Rosa paced, thinking through countermeasures. We need documentation. Legal proof of your ownership, clear title papers, veterinary records proving the horse's bloodlines and health status. Sarah kept everything in her desk, organized by date and category because that's how her mind worked. Nate's voice softened, saying his wife's name. She always said documentation was the difference between legitimate business and wishful thinking. They spent the afternoon gathering papers, property deeds, breeding certificates, purchase receipts, going back 5 years, veterinary assessments signed by Dr. Webb, who'd treated the horses regularly. Rosa organized everything into a leather portfolio that would travel with them to Garrison Station. If anyone questions your right to sell, we have proof, she said, checking the documents one final time. If anyone questions bloodlines, we have certificates. If anyone questions health status, we have recent veterinary assessments. What if they question your authority to conduct negotiations on my behalf? Rosa had been dreading that question. Then I'll produce written authorization naming me as your legal representative for this transaction. Rosa, that kind of document implies power of attorney, implies a relationship that goes beyond emergency assistance. I know what it implies, but without it, Beatrice can claim I'm acting without authority and get sales blocked. Rosa met his gaze. Unless you want to conduct negotiations yourself. You're healthy enough now to travel if we're careful. Nate considered this, weighing pride against practical necessity. If I'm there conducting my own sales, Beatrice can't claim fraud or unauthorized representation. But I'm still weak. If fever comes back during negotiations, then I'll be there to handle it. But you're right. You being present eliminates their strongest legal argument against us. Rosa made a decision. We both go. You conduct negotiations, I provide support. Partners. Partners, Nate agreed. They were loading supplies for the trip when Fletcher rode up, his weathered face tight with news that couldn't wait. Beatrice Thornton's filed papers with the territorial court, he said without preamble. Claims you're mentally incompetent due to fever illness that Mrs. Delgado is exercising undue influence over your business decisions, and that any transactions conducted before January 1st should be considered void pending competency hearing. That's insane, Nate said. I'm recovering from flu, not brain damage. Doesn't matter if it's true, just matters that she filed the claim. Fletcher dismounted, began helping load the wagon. Judge Morrison Ruth's husband conveniently has agreed to hear the competency petition on January 2nd. 2 days after the foreclosure deadline, Rosa said quietly. So even if we generate the money, the sale gets invalidated and we still lose the ranch. That's the strategy. Fletcher's expression was grim. She's covering every angle, but there might be a counter-strategy. What? Get a doctor's assessment proving Nate's competent. Written medical statement declaring him of sound mind and capable of conducting business. If you have that documentation at time of sale, buyers can't claim later they were dealing with someone mentally impaired. Dr. Webb, Nate said. He's treated me for years. He knows I'm not incompetent. Will he provide written assessment on short notice? Rosa asked. And will he risk Beatrice's anger by contradicting her legal claims? Fletcher smiled slightly. Augustus Webb has been territorial doctor for 30 years. He doesn't give a damn about Beatrice Thornton's anger, and he's treated enough mysterious illnesses in the Mexican community to know exactly what kind of woman she is. I'll ride to his office, now explain the situation. Fletcher. Nate stopped him. Why are you doing this, helping us this much? You barely knew Sarah after she married me. Fletcher's expression softened. Sarah wrote to me every month for 10 years until she died. Told me about the ranch, about the horses, about building something beautiful with someone who loved her. After she died, I came here to see what she'd created. Found you destroying yourself with grief, and knew I couldn't let everything she loved disappear. He paused, then added, and watching Mrs. Delgado fight for this place, fight like Sarah would have fought, Made me remember why Sarah always said mercy was stronger than money. I'm helping because someone should. Because it's right. That's reason enough. After Fletcher left, Rosa and Nate worked in silence, loading feed and water buckets, preparing transport crates for the horses that would make the 15-mile journey to Garrison Station. We need to practice, Rosa said finally. Practice what? Negotiations. If you're conducting sales, you need to be prepared for hard questions, lowball offers, and buyers trying to leverage your desperation. Rosa set down the bucket she'd been filling. I'll play buyer. You practice responses. For the next hour, Rosa threw every difficult scenario at Nate she could imagine. Buyers questioning bloodlines, demanding price reductions, claiming horses weren't worth asking prices, suggesting they'd found better stock elsewhere. At first, Nate stumbled unused to aggressive negotiation tactics, but Rosa pushed harder, forcing him to defend his animal's value without sounding desperate. This stallion looks old, she said, pointing at Thunder. Why should I pay premium price for aging breeding stock? Thunder's 8 years old prime breeding age for stallions, Nate countered. His genetic lines trace to Arabian imports that cost $5,000 in Kentucky. His offspring consistently show superior conformation and temperament. You're not buying an old horse. You're buying guaranteed quality for the next 12 years of breeding. Better? Rosa said. But you're still justifying. Try this instead. Thunder's bloodlines speak for themselves. If you need me to justify his value, you're not the buyer I'm looking for. Make them prove they're worthy of the horse, not the other way around. Nate tried again, this time with more confidence. By the time evening came, he'd transformed from uncertain seller to someone who understood his animal's worth and wouldn't accept less than fair value. You're going to do fine, Rosa told him as they finished preparations. Tomorrow, we load the horses. Day after tomorrow, we change everything. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep, despite exhaustion that should have knocked her unconscious. She kept running scenarios, identifying potential failures, trying to prepare for complications she couldn't predict. She was still awake when Nate appeared in the doorway of Sarah's bedroom, where Rosa had finally accepted she was sleeping. Can't rest either, he asked. Too many things that could go wrong. Or too many things that could go right. Nate leaned against the doorframe. Rosa, regardless of what happens at Garrison Station, I need you to know something. What? If we lose this ranch, if everything fails despite our best efforts, I won't regret any of it. Won't regret you staying. Won't regret fighting. Won't regret believing we could win against impossible odds. His voice was rough with emotion. You gave me back my life. Even if we lose everything else, that gift can't be taken away. Rosa felt tears threaten and pushed them back. We're not losing. We're going to win. But if we don't, then we tried. We fought. We refused to surrender. Rosa stood, moved to where Nate waited. And we did it together, which means neither of us faces defeat alone. That counts for something. They stood there in the darkness of Sarah's room. Two people who'd been strangers 5 days ago, now bound by shared determination, and something deeper neither was ready to name. Get some sleep, Rosa said finally. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. December 27th dawned clear and brutally cold, 15 below zero, with wind that cut through clothing like knives. Rosa woke before sunrise dressed in layers of wool and practical determination. Loading the horses took 3 hours of careful work. Thunder loaded first, setting the example for others. Duchess stayed behind with her filly, too, recently delivered to risk the journey. Jackson came next, then the younger horses, who'd never been transported before and needed patient coaxing. By the time they departed Copper Ridge Ranch, the sun stood high and pale, offering light but no warmth. Nate drove the wagon while Rosa rode Pablo alongside, keeping watch on the horses, and on Nate, for signs his fever might return under stress. The 15-mile journey to Garrison Station passed in tense silence, broken only by wagon wheels crunching frozen ground and horses' occasional protests at the cold. Rosa's mind ran continuous calculations: arrival time inspection schedules, negotiation strategies, backup plans, if buyers failed to appear. They reached Garrison Station by early afternoon, found Tom Bradley waiting, as promised. The station master was a compact man in his 50s, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Delgado, Mr. Bridger. I've got the holding pens ready and telegraph access arranged. 3 buyers confirmed arrival tomorrow: Morrison on the 8 o'clock train from Fort McKenzie, Chen on the 10 o'clock from Fort Robinson, Webb on the noon train from Denver." "Perfect," Rosa said. "Mr. Bradley, has anyone else been making inquiries about these sales? Anyone from Silver Creek or Thornton Banking?" Bradley's expression darkened. "Beatrice Thornton sent a telegram yesterday claiming fraud concerns. Asked me to delay any livestock transactions pending legal review." Rosa's heart sank. "What did you tell her?" "Told her I run a railroad station, not a courthouse. If she has legal concerns, she can bring a judge and a warrant. Until then, I facilitate legitimate commerce for anyone with cash money and proper documentation." Bradley's smile was grim. "I've known Augustus Webb for 20 years. If he says Nate Bridger's competent to conduct business, that's good enough for me." "Dr. Webb provided assessment?" Nate asked. "Fletcher brought it this morning. Detailed medical statement declaring you recovered from influenza, mentally sound and fully capable of managing your own affairs. Signed, dated, and notarized." Bradley handed over the document. "Keep that with your other papers. If anyone questions your competency, you've got medical proof they're lying." Rosa felt some of the tension ease. One problem solved, dozens more waiting. They spent the afternoon settling the horses, preparing inspection areas, reviewing documentation one final time. Rosa made Nate rest while she handled physical work, watching him carefully for fever signs that thankfully didn't appear. As sunset painted the frozen landscape in shades of rose and gold, Rosa stood alone at the holding pens, watching Thunder pace his temporary enclosure. "Tomorrow we find out if we're crazy or brilliant," she told the stallion. "Probably both." Thunder nickered softly, pressing his head against her hand in the gesture of trust that still amazed her. "You deserve better than being sold to pay someone else's debts," Rosa continued. "Deserve an owner who will appreciate what you are. If we lose tomorrow, if I can't find you a good home, you will." Rosa turned to find Nate standing behind her, wrapped in his coat, but looking stronger than he had since she'd found him. "You'll find them all good homes because that's who you are," Nate continued. "Someone who fights for those who can't fight for themselves, who refuses to accept defeat even when victory seems impossible." "I'm terrified," Rosa admitted. "Terrified we'll fail. Terrified I'll say the wrong thing or miss some crucial detail. Terrified tomorrow will prove we were just desperate fools fighting battles we couldn't win. Then we'll be terrified together." Nate moved to stand beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. "And we'll fight anyway, because that's what Sarah would have done. What your Antonio would have expected. What we owe to ourselves and everyone who believed we were worth saving." They stood together in the fading light, watching horses settle for the night, gathering strength for the battle that would determine everything. "Rosa." Nate's voice was quiet. "If we succeed tomorrow, if we save the ranch and pay the debt, what happens then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean your reputation in Silver Creek is destroyed. Your business is finished. You've sacrificed everything to help me fight this battle. When it's over, where do you go? What do you do?" Rosa had been avoiding that question, too, focused on immediate survival to contemplate what victory might look like. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Haven't thought past tomorrow?" "Maybe you should think about it, about what comes after." Nate hesitated, then continued. "Because if we win this fight, I'd like you to consider staying, not as emergency help or temporary partnership, as permanent partner in running this ranch." Rosa's breath caught. "Nate, you're still grieving Sarah. You're not thinking clearly about... I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years. Nate turned to face her fully. I'm not talking about romance or replacing Sarah. I'm talking about recognizing that you're the reason this ranch might survive, that your business skills and determination are exactly what this operation needs to succeed long term. That partnership between us works in ways I didn't expect and don't want to lose. People will talk, will assume. People are already talking, already assuming. We can't control that, but we can control what we build together if you're willing to stay and help me honor Sarah's legacy by making it stronger than it's ever been. Rosa looked at the horses at the station at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She thought about Silver Creek and the business she'd lost, about Antonio and the guilt she'd carried, about Sarah and the debt she'd finally begun to repay. Ask me again after tomorrow, she said finally. After we know whether we've won or lost, then I'll give you an answer. Fair enough. They returned to the station where Bradley had arranged sleeping quarters, separate rooms, properly chaperoned, nothing that could add fuel to Beatrice's accusations. Rosa lay awake most of the night listening to wind howl around the building and running through every possible scenario for tomorrow's negotiations. She must have slept eventually because suddenly Bradley was shaking her awake. Mrs. Delgado, Morrison's train arrived early. He's already inspecting the horses. You need to get out there. Rosa, dressed faster than she'd ever moved, reached the holding pens to find a cavalry officer in his mid-40s examining Thunder with the expertise of someone who knew horseflesh intimately. Captain Morrison, she said, extending her hand. Rosa Delgado, I've been coordinating logistics for this sale. Morrison shook her hand with firm respect. Mrs. Delgado, your telegraph communications were impressively professional. And this stallion... He turned back to Thunder. His conformation is exceptional. Arabian bloodlines are clearly evident. What's his temperament under stress? Steady, protective of his herd, but responds well to experienced handling. He's carried Mr. Bridger through blizzards and difficult terrain without panic. Rosa gestured to where Nate was approaching. Mr. Bridger can provide detailed history. Nate stepped forward, and Rosa watched him transform into the confident rancher she suspected he'd been before grief broke him. He answered Morrison's questions with precise detail, demonstrated Thunder's responsiveness, provided documentation of breeding history and veterinary assessments. What's your asking price? Morrison asked finally. $1,800, Nate said without hesitation. Non-negotiable for quality of this caliber. Rosa held her breath. They'd discussed pricing strategy, start high, establish value, make buyers prove they deserved premium stock. Morrison considered this, ran his hands over Thunder's legs one more time, then nodded. $1,500, cash today if you'll throw in one of the younger geldings for training purposes. $1,650 for both horses, and I include full breeding documentation and health certificates. $1,600, final offer. $1,650 is my final price, Captain. These animals are worth it, and you know it. Morrison smiled slightly. $1,650 it is. I'll telegraph Fort Mackenzie for fund authorization. Should have confirmation within the hour. 1 buyer secured. 2 more to convince. Colonel Chen arrived on the 10 o'clock train, examined the remaining horses with military efficiency, and made his interest clear immediately. I need 2 cavalry stallions quality confirmed delivery by mid-January. What can you offer? Nate showed him the younger geldings, both well-trained, both from Thunder's bloodlines, both exactly what cavalry service required. $3,000 for both, Nate said. That's premium pricing. For premium horses, you won't find better in this territory. Chen walked both horses, tested their responses, reviewed documentation with thorough attention. $2,800, and you deliver them to Fort Robinson by January 10th. $2,900 and delivery is extra. $75 per horse for winter transport to Fort Robinson. Deal. I'll telegraph for funds now. 2 buyers secured. 1 more critical negotiation remaining. Marcus Webb arrived on the noon train, examined the remaining horses, and focused immediately on what Nate had been dreading: questions about Duchess. "Your telegram mentioned a pregnant mare. Where is she?" "She delivered prematurely 3 days ago," Nate admitted. "Mother and filly both healthy, but I kept them at the ranch rather than risk transport so soon after birth." Webb's expression showed keen interest rather than disappointment. "Premature but healthy. What's the filly's condition?" "Strong. Nursing well. Small but vigorous. And the mare's proven she can carry foals despite early delivery, which means her bloodlines are resilient." Webb made notes. "I'm interested in purchasing both mare and filly sight unseen based on bloodline documentation. $2,000 for the pair." $2,500, Nate countered. "Duchess has proven breeding capacity, and her filly shows exceptional early development. You're buying established value plus future potential." $2,200. $2,400, and I include complete breeding history going back 3 generations. Webb considered this, then extended his hand. "Done. I'll need delivery arrangements once the filly's ready to travel." Rosa did rapid calculations while the men telegraphed for funds. Morrison $1,650. Chen $2,900 plus delivery fees. Webb $2,400. Total $750. More than enough to pay the foreclosure debt with surplus remaining. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, with 3 days preparation, and every force in Silver Creek working against them, they'd actually done it. Rosa felt her knees go weak and leaned against the fence rail for support. "Mrs. Delgado." Morrison approached with concern. "Are you all right?" "Fine. Just, it's been a long few days." "I imagine it has." Morrison's expression showed respect. "Mrs. Delgado, I've conducted livestock purchases across 3 territories. Your coordination of this sale was the most professional I've encountered. If you ever consider working in procurement or livestock management, Fort McKenzie would be fortunate to have someone of your capabilities." "Thank you, Captain, but I have commitments elsewhere." By late afternoon, all funds had been telegraphed and confirmed. Bradley helped them count the money, exact amounts in federal banknotes properly documented and receipted. $7,750, Bradley announced. "Minus station fees and telegraph costs, you're left with $7,650. More than enough to pay Thornton's debt, with over $1,500 remaining for ranch operations." Nate stared at the money as if unable to believe it was real. "We did it," he said quietly. "Ed. Rosa, we actually did it." "Not yet. Money doesn't matter until it's in Thornton's hands before the deadline." Rosa was already calculating. "We ride back tonight, arrive at Copper Ridge before midnight, depart for Silver Creek at dawn. That gets us to the bank by noon tomorrow, 6 hours before the deadline expires. Tonight, in this cold after the day we've had, tonight. Because I don't trust Beatrice not to find some way to claim we missed the deadline by minutes. We deliver payment with hours to spare, eliminate any argument about timing." Nate looked at her with something between admiration and exhaustion. "You never stop fighting, do you?" "Not when I'm this close to winning." They departed Garrison Station as sunset painted the frozen landscape in shades of fire. The return journey passed in tense silence, both too exhausted and too wired to speak, both afraid to believe they'd actually succeeded, until the debt was paid and the ranch was safe. They reached Copper Ridge Ranch near midnight, checked on Duchess and the filly. Both healthy, thriving, despite early concerns, then collapsed into brief sleep before dawn departure for Silver Creek. Rosa woke before sunrise, her body protesting every movement, but her mind sharp with victory, so close she could taste it. "Final push," she told Nate, as they prepared for the last ride. 6 more hours, and this is over. 6 more hours, and we've saved Sarah's legacy. And proven Beatrice Thornton doesn't control everything in this territory." They rode through pre-dawn darkness toward Silver Creek, toward confrontation with the woman who'd tried to destroy them, toward the final moment when money and determination would prove stronger than social power and corruption. Toward whatever came after, when two people who'd been broken by loss would have to figure out what victory actually looked like, and whether partnership forged in crisis could survive the peace that followed. They reached Silver Creek as church bells struck 9 o'clock, the sound carrying across frozen air like a declaration of something Rosa couldn't quite name. Victory, maybe. Or Judgment Day. Thornton Banking occupied the most prominent building on Main Street, 2 stories of red brick that spoke of money and permanence and power that crushed people like her without breaking stride. Rosa dismounted her legs, stiff from days of riding and stress that hadn't let up since Christmas morning. Nate climbed down from his horse more carefully, still regaining strength, but standing straighter than he had since she'd found him dying in the snow. "You ready for this?" Rosa asked, patting the leather satchel where $7,000 waited to change everything. "Been ready since I woke up in my own house instead of frozen in a snowbank." Nate adjusted his coat, squared his shoulders. "Let's finish this." The bank's interior was warm and oppressively quiet, all dark wood and brass fixtures designed to make poor people feel their poverty. 3 customers waited at the counter, ranchers by their dress, probably depositing Christmas earnings or paying their own debts. Behind the main counter, a thin clerk with spectacles looked up, and his expression shifted from professional courtesy to something harder when he recognized them. "Mr. Bridger, Mrs. Delgado, Mr. Thornton is not available." "We're not here to see Silas," Rosa said, her voice carrying across the quiet space. "We're here to make payment on mortgage debt owed by Nathaniel Bridger, Copper Ridge Ranch. Full payment, including penalties and interest." The clerk's face went pale. "I'll need to fetch Mr. Thornton. This type of transaction requires you to accept legal tender for debt owed," Nate interrupted. "We have full payment in cash. You have a legal obligation to receive it." "Nevertheless, Mr. Thornton specifically instructed that any transactions involving Copper Ridge Ranch must receive his personal approval before what?" Rosa stepped closer to the counter. "Before you can accept legal payment of legitimate debt. That's not banking procedure. That's obstruction." The clerk's hand moved toward a bell that would summon Thornton from his office upstairs, but Rosa was faster. She set the leather satchel on the counter with a heavy thud that made every head in the bank turn. $7,650, she said clearly, loud enough for everyone present to hear. "Cash payment for mortgage debt on Copper Ridge Ranch property owned by Nathaniel Bridger. We're making this payment publicly with witnesses at 9:15 on December 28, 1885, 6 hours before your foreclosure deadline expires." The clerk stared at the satchel like it might contain snakes. Behind them, Rosa heard whispers from the other customers, word spreading that the Mexican woman and the grieving widower had somehow raised impossible money against Beatrice Thornton's coordinated assault. Footsteps descended the stairs rapidly, and Silas Thornton emerged with his wife close behind. Beatrice's face showed shock that shifted quickly to calculation, while Silas maintained the professional mask of a banker confronting unexpected complications. "Mr. Bridger, Mrs. Delgado." Silas's voice carried false warmth. "I understand there's some confusion about—" "No confusion," Nate cut him off. "We're here to pay our debt in full. Your clerk seems reluctant to accept legal payment." "I'm sure there's simply a procedural question that needs—" "There's no procedural question." Rosa opened the satchel, began removing bundled banknotes. "Federal currency properly denominated, legally obtained through livestock sales, conducted yesterday at Garrison Station. We have receipts, documentation, and witness statements confirming every transaction." She laid the money on the counter in neat stacks while every person in the bank watched in silence. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Rosa's voice remained steady, counting out their victory in $100 increments. 4,000, 5,000. Beatrice stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Silas, you can't accept this payment. The competency hearing—" "Hasn't happened yet," Rosa interrupted without pausing her counting. "And according to medical assessment from Dr. Augustus Webb, Mr. Bridger is mentally sound and fully capable of conducting business. We have notarized documentation." Those sales were conducted under fraudulent pretenses. Those sales were conducted with military officers and licensed breeders who examined horses personally, reviewed complete documentation, and negotiated prices through legitimate telegraph communications. Rosa finished counting. $7,650. Count it yourself if you doubt me. Silas Thornton stared at the money with an expression Rosa couldn't quite read. Not anger exactly. Something closer to respect for an opponent who'd outmaneuvered him. The debt owed is $5,300, including penalties through today's date, Silas said, finally his banker's instincts overriding whatever personal feelings he might have. This payment exceeds that amount significantly. We're aware. Nate spoke for the first time since they'd begun counting. The excess represents payments toward next year's mortgage obligations plus interest owed for late payments. We want clear accounting showing Copper Ridge Ranch current on all obligations through March 1886. Silas, you can't. Beatrice started. I can, and I will. Silas cut off his wife with unexpected firmness. Mrs. Thornton, this is banking business, not social commentary. Mr. Bridger has presented lawful payment of legitimate debt. I have no legal grounds to refuse it. The railroad contract is no longer my concern. Silas met his wife's shocked stare. I've reconsidered my association with Montana and Pacific Railroad's land acquisition strategies. Their methods don't align with ethical banking practices I want associated with this institution. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a gun that couldn't be unfired. Beatrice's face went white with rage. You're throwing away thousands of dollars in commission fees because of some misguided moral qualm. I'm preserving my reputation as a banker who operates within legal boundaries rather than manipulating foreclosures for corporate profit. Silas turned to his clerk. Process this payment. Generate receipts showing Copper Ridge Ranch debt satisfied in full with accounting for advance payments toward future obligations. The clerk moved mechanically processing the transaction, while Rosa and Nate stood silent, afraid to believe it was actually happening until the paperwork was complete. 15 minutes later, the clerk handed Nate an official receipt, stamped with the bank seal. Copper Ridge Ranch mortgage debt satisfied in full, as of December 28, 1885, 9:37 a.m. Advance payments of $2,350 credited toward future obligations. Next payment due, March 1, 1886. Nate stared at the paper like it might dissolve if he looked away. It's over. His voice came out hoarse. It's over, Rosa confirmed. The ranch is safe. Around them, the other customers began talking at once, spreading news that would race through Silver Creek faster than telegraph signals. The Mexican widow and the grieving widower had beaten Beatrice Thornton at her own game, had raised impossible money through determination and partnership, had proven that courage could triumph over corruption. Beatrice turned on her heel and left without another word, her exit speaking volumes about rage that had no outlet. Silas remained regarding them with an expression that might have been regret. Mrs. Delgado, Mr. Bridger, for what it's worth, I apologize for my wife's actions. Her campaign against your reputations was not something I endorsed or supported. But you didn't stop it either, Rosa observed quietly. No, I didn't. Silas's acknowledgement carried weight. I convinced myself that business considerations justified overlooking personal cruelty. I was wrong, and I'm genuinely glad you succeeded despite obstacles we placed in your path. Your railroad commission, Nate asked. That was real. It was real, and very lucrative. But some money costs more than it's worth. Silas glanced toward where his wife had exited. I'll be dealing with consequences of that decision for quite some time. After they left the bank, Rosa and Nate stood on the frozen street, breathing steam in the December air, trying to process victory that felt surreal after days of crisis. We did it. Nate said again, like repetition might make it feel real. Rosa, we actually saved the ranch. We did. Rosa felt exhaustion trying to claim her now that adrenaline was fading. Sarah's legacy is secure. The horses have good homes. You have clear title and advance payments giving you breathing room to rebuild operations. We have clear title, Nate corrected. This was never just my fight. Before Rosa could respond, voices called from across the street. Fletcher was approaching with Dr. Webb and Pearl Wong, the Chinese laundress, who'd been Rosa's only friend in Silver Creek. Is it true? Fletcher demanded. Did you actually pay off the debt? Nate held up the receipt as answer. Fletcher let out a whoop that startled horses tied nearby. I knew it. Knew you two would find a way. He grabbed Nate in a hug that nearly knocked the taller man over. Sarah would be so damn proud. Dr. Webb shook both their hands with professional warmth. Congratulations. And Mrs. Delgado, I meant what I wrote in my assessment. Mr. Bridger is completely competent. Anyone claiming otherwise for legal manipulation is a liar, and I'll testify to that fact in any court. Pearl Wong approached Rosa with characteristic directness. You did good thing. Brave thing. Whole Chinese community knows what you did, how Beatrice tried to destroy you. We remember. Thank you, Pearl. Rosa felt emotion threatening and pushed it back. But I didn't do anything special, just helped someone who needed help. You risk everything when you have nothing safe to risk, Pearl corrected. That very special. That very brave. They were standing there accepting congratulations from the few people in Silver Creek who'd supported them when a familiar wagon approached. Mrs. Henderson, the woman whose Christmas dress order had started Rosa's journey to Copper Ridge Ranch, pulled up with determined expression. Mrs. Delgado, I owe you an apology. Rosa blinked in surprise. Mrs. Henderson, you don't. I do. I canceled my dress order because Beatrice Thornton told me patronizing your business meant endorsing scandalous behavior. I was a coward who cared more about social standing than doing right. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried genuine regret. But watching what you did, saving a man's life, fighting for his ranch, standing up to corruption, that's not scandal. That's heroism. And I'd be honored if you'd consider taking my order again. Double your original price for my cowardice. Mrs. Henderson, that's not necessary. It is necessary. And I'm not the only one. Mrs. Henderson gestured to where other women were emerging from shops along Main Street. Half the town's been talking about nothing but your courage for 3 days. You've got more customer interest now than you did before Beatrice tried to destroy you. Rosa felt the world tilt slightly as she grasped the implications. Her business wasn't dead. Might actually be stronger than before. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay in Silver Creek. Say you'll keep building your business here. Mrs. Henderson's smile was genuine. And say you'll sew that dress I need for New Year's celebration. After Mrs. Henderson left with renewed order, confirmed, Rosa turned to find Nate watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Looks like you've got a decision to make, he said quietly. What decision? Whether to stay in Silver Creek rebuilding your business or accept my offer of partnership at Copper Ridge Ranch. Nate stepped closer. I meant what I said at Garrison Station. This ranch needs your skills and determination, but I won't pressure you to choose. You've sacrificed enough without me asking for more. Rosa looked at the town that had rejected her, then tried to reclaim her after she'd proven her worth. Looked at Fletcher and Dr. Webb, and Pearl Wong, the few who'd stood by her when it mattered. Looked at Nate, whose life she'd saved, and who'd somehow saved hers in return. Ask me properly, she said. Not as obligation or gratitude. Ask me what you're really asking. Nate understood. His expression shifted from careful to honest, from guarded to vulnerable. Rosa Delgado, will you consider staying at Copper Ridge Ranch as my full partner in managing operations, not because you owe Sarah's memory or because I need rescuing, but because you're the most capable, determined, fierce person I've met, because fighting beside you these past days reminded me who I used to be before grief broke me. Because I think we could build something extraordinary together if you're willing to take that risk. Business partnership, Rosa asked. Or something more? That's up to you. I'm not expecting romance or replacing what we lost with Antonio and Sarah, but I'm not ruling it out either if it develops naturally. Nate's honesty was complete. What I'm offering is choice. Partnership now, possibility later, and time to figure out what we're becoming together. Rosa considered his words, weighed them against opportunities in Silver Creek, against the life she'd been building before everything changed. I'll stay, she said finally. On conditions. Name them. First, I maintain my sewing business from the ranch. Continue serving customers, keep my income independent so I'm never dependent on your charity. Agreed. The ranch has space that could become excellent workshop. Second, we establish clear legal partnership. Written contracts, profit-sharing, decision-making authority. Nothing assumed, everything documented. Smart and fair. Agreed. Third. Rosa hesitated, choosing words carefully. We take things slow. Partnership first, friendship growing naturally, and only move toward more if we both feel it's right. No pressure, no expectations based on gratitude or convenience. That's what I hoped you'd say. Nate extended his hand. Partners. Rosa shook his hand. Felt calluses earned through ranch work, match her own earned through sewing and survival. Partners. Fletcher cleared his throat loudly. So are we celebrating this properly, or just standing in the street freezing? Celebrating, Nate decided. Rosa just agreed to save my ranch permanently instead of temporarily. That deserves recognition. They gathered at the Silver Creek Hotel, where the owner, a practical man who cared more about paying customers than social politics, provided a private room for their small group. Fletcher ordered food and coffee, told stories about Sarah that made Nate laugh instead of cry, included Rosa in memories of the sister he'd lost. Dr. Webb shared medical tales from 30 years treating frontier ailments, including several pointed stories about women who'd survived impossible circumstances through courage and determination. Pearl Wong contributed her own immigration story, the difficulties of being Chinese in Montana Territory, the daily choice to keep fighting when surrender felt easier. We're all outsiders in some way, Dr. Webb observed, which means we understand what Mrs. Delgado and Mr. Bridger accomplished. Not just saving a ranch, but proving that courage matters more than social power. And partnership matters more than going it alone, Fletcher added, raising his coffee cup. To partnership, to fighting impossible battles, to winning anyway. They toasted with coffee instead of whiskey, celebrating victory that tasted sweeter for being hard-won. Later that afternoon, Rosa and Nate rode back to Copper Ridge Ranch in comfortable silence, both too exhausted for conversation but content in shared accomplishment. The ranch appeared different somehow when they arrived, not physically changed, but emotionally transformed from burden into possibility, from place of grief into foundation for new beginning. Duchess greeted them from her stall, her filly nursing contentedly beside her. They're going to Marcus Webb in 3 weeks, Nate said, watching the pair. But until then, we keep them healthy and strong. And after they leave, we start rebuilding breeding program with the advance money from sales. Purchase new stock, develop bloodlines, create something Sarah would be proud of. Nate paused. Something we can be proud of together. They spent the evening handling necessary work, feeding remaining horses, checking supplies, documenting transactions for legal records that might be needed if Beatrice tried any future challenges. As darkness fell, Rosa found herself in Sarah's kitchen preparing dinner from Sarah's pantry, using Sarah's recipes. But it felt different now. Not like using dead woman's things, but like honoring legacy while building something new. I found something today, Nate said during dinner. In Sarah's desk while looking for property documents. He handed Rosa a sealed envelope with her name written on it in feminine handwriting she recognized instantly. Sarah wrote this. Dated 6 months before she died. I never knew it existed until today. Nate's voice was rough with emotion. I think she wanted you to have it. Somehow knew you'd be here when I needed you. Rosa opened the envelope with shaking hands, unfolded pages covered in Sarah's precise script. The letter began, "Dear Rosa, if you're reading this, something has happened to me and Nate needs help. He won't ask for." Rosa read, while tears streamed down her face. Sarah's voice coming alive through words written from the edge of death. Sarah had known her pregnancy was dangerous, had known she might not survive. And she'd written letters to people she trusted, asking them to care for what she loved most if she couldn't. "She believed you were still out there somewhere," Nate said quietly. "Hoped you'd hear somehow if she died, that you'd come help if he needed it. She couldn't have known I'd be in Silver Creek. Couldn't have known I'd hear those horses screaming. Maybe she didn't need to know. Maybe she just trusted that mercy calls people when they're needed most." Nate's smile was sad and genuine simultaneously. And maybe she was right. Rosa finished reading, folded the letter, carefully held it against her chest, like the precious thing it was. "She gave us permission," Rosa whispered, "to build something new, to honor her by living fully instead of preserving grief." "She did. But you don't need her permission, Rosa. You need your own. Permission to believe you deserve happiness after Antonio. Permission to let go of guilt that was never yours to carry. I'm not sure I know how to do that." "Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. One choice at a time. Building partnership first, letting everything else develop naturally." They cleaned up from dinner in comfortable silence, working together with the efficiency of partners who'd learned each other's rhythms through crisis. Later, Rosa climbed the stairs to Sarah's bedroom that felt less like borrowing and more like inheriting. She lay down in Sarah's bed, surrounded by Sarah's books and Sarah's pressed flowers, but she didn't feel like an intruder anymore. She felt like someone carrying forward legacy entrusted to her care. Sleep came easier than it had in years, untroubled by guilt or fear or desperate need to prove her worth through endless work. She woke at dawn to find Nate already in the barn, checking on Duchess, and the filly with the dedication that made him good rancher despite his grief. "Morning," Rosa called, bringing coffee she'd brewed in Sarah's kitchen. "Morning?" Nate accepted the cup gratefully. "I was thinking about spring plans. If we purchased 2 new mares and a young stallion with our advance money, we could start rebuilding breeding program by summer. And if I convert the bunkhouse into workshop space, I could handle 6 to 8 sewing customers simultaneously while still managing ranch business." They discussed logistics over coffee in the barn, while Duchess's filly explored her stall with increasing confidence. "She needs a name," Rosa observed, watching the filly's playful investigation of her surroundings. "Sarah named all our horses," Nate said. "Had a system named them after qualities she valued or places she loved." What would she have named this one? Nate thought for a long moment, watching the tiny filly who'd survived premature birth through sheer determination and careful nursing. "Hope," he said finally, "because she represents everything we fought for, everything we're building toward, everything Sarah wanted this ranch to become." "Hope." Rosa tested the name, found it perfect. "Welcome to the world, Hope. You've got no idea how much you mean to everyone here." The filly nickered softly, as if understanding, then went back to nursing, while her mother watched with patient contentment. Outside, morning sun painted frozen landscape in shades of gold and rose. The wind that had carried death just days ago now whispered promises of spring that would come eventually, of seasons changing, of life, continuing despite loss and grief, and battles fought against impossible odds. Rosa and Nate stood together in the barn doorway, watching sunrise paint the world with light, drinking coffee that tasted better than victory, comfortable in silence that came from partnership earned rather than assumed. "We did good," Nate said quietly. "We did. Thank you for hearing the horses scream when you could have kept driving, for staying when you should have run, for fighting when surrender seemed easier. Thank you for giving me reason to be brave again, for showing me that helping people still matters, even when the world says it doesn't." They stood shoulder to shoulder, not quite touching, but close enough to feel warmth, watching their ranch wake to new day that felt like possibility made real. Behind them in the barn, Hope nursed and Duchess rested, and life continued with the stubborn determination that made survival possible on the frontier. Ahead of them stretched days and weeks and years of work and partnership and slowly building something beautiful from the ashes of grief they'd both carried too long. Neither knew exactly what they were becoming together. Neither needed to know yet. All that mattered was the choice they'd made to keep fighting, keep hoping, keep building, despite every reason to surrender. All that mattered was partnership forged in crisis and tested by fire and proven strong enough to carry whatever came next. "Come on," Rosa said finally. "Those horses won't feed themselves, and I've got sewing orders to plan and ranch accounts to review." "Partners," Nate agreed. "Partners." They turned from the sunrise together and walked back into the life they were building. One choice, one day, one small victory at a time, proving that courage and mercy could triumph over money and power when people refused to break. Proving that love lost didn't mean love was finished. Proving that second chances were real if you were brave enough to fight for them. And that sometimes the person who saved your life was the one you didn't know you were waiting for until you heard them answer when you screamed for help.